This is Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Ron Rohde, Kentucky Afield's first host back in 1953. Now, I'm proud to present Charlie Baglin.
The numbers are in another record-setting year, shattering the old record by 10,000. We are talking about deer harvest in Kentucky for the 2013-14 season. We go inside outdoors with a woman in charge of deer and elk in the state to learn what has made Kentucky, as the newspaper quotes, a deer destination. Plus the elk lottery, all ahead on Kentucky Afield Radio.
It's time to register for Kentucky's elk hunts. This is Tim Farmer. The Kentucky Fish and Wildlife website is Elk Central and the only place to enter this year's draw. Elk hunting in Old Kentucky. Take it from me, there's nothing like it. 1,000 names will be drawn, and with the Pick 2 option, you gotta like your odds. The deadline is midnight, April 30th. The Kentucky Elk Draw. Enter at fw.ky.gov. Again, fw.ky.gov.
Kentucky's Nature and Wildlife Fund. You see it as a contribution option when you prepare your state tax return. But you also see it as songbirds and wildflowers. You can see it in clear, flowing streams. Sometimes it's so secluded you may never see it at all. But if you only see it on your PC as you prepare your taxes, that's good too. Google it and see the difference this fund makes. Kentucky's Nature and Wildlife Fund, the natural tax shelter.
This is Kentucky Afield Radio. My name is Charlie Baglin, and I am here today to bore you to tears. In all likelihood, I will bring a tear to your eye, or at least put you to sleep. Evidently, I'm pretty good at that, at least according to my guest. Right, Tina?
Okay.
Of course, Kentucky Afield Radio is right here in the same building with Kentucky Afield Television, and you walked up to the studio and you said, hey to me, but you looked out and you saw a producer with the Kentucky Afield TV show, but you called him Sunshine. Why didn't you call me Hey Sunshine? Am I just not cute enough?
You're just not sunny.
I'm not a sunny kind of guy?
You're just not shiny.
And Nathan is.
Okay, you have to admit that Nathan is sunshiny.
He's the stud.
No, he's just sunshiny.
He reminds me of that Tom Selleck kind of guy from back, early 80s. Late 70s, if you remember, Tom Selleck now on Blue Bloods, still the gorgeous man.
Yeah, but it's really not fair because he's how old now? 60-something?
He must be. He's older than I am.
He's got to be late 60s.
I venture to say though, you would call him Sunshine if he walked into the room. But yet I'm still.
No,
I don't
it's
warrant
personality driven.
I don't warrant the sunshine. If we base it on sunshine, on personality, then yeah, Nathan would be Mr. Sunshine.
He's sunshiny. He is. I've worked with him on stuff at horrendous hours, and I know he's been on the road, and he's always pleasant.
Radio isn't always done in the field. It could be. It's just difficult.
It would be hard.
It's very easy to sit down and say, all right, now tell me what happened. Those TV fellows, buddy, they have to work.
They do.
They are out at 4 o'clock in the morning. Mm-hmm. And, leaving the TV studio at 3:30 all night to get someplace before daybreak because you have to operate on the wildlife schedule.
Yeah, horrible hours, and then they do all that to get what ends up amounting to 5 minutes that the viewer sees, and the viewer has no idea the hours that went into, and these guys are such perfectionists too, so they're out there right on time and doing all this stuff to make sure they get it just right, and then, turn around and drive all the way back.
There were 2 other things that you said. I started immediately as saying there were 3 things I wanted to bring up. The other one was, I hear a lot of echo. What are you knocking into?
I'm knocking into wires, apparently.
The other 2 things I wanted to ask you are, or just statements I wanted to make, is that you said, if y'all get there at 6:08 versus you guys or you all, you're from the South. I like that.
I'm from Georgia. I'm from the deep South.
You said y'all. And I'm going to bet, because you said it to Hey Sunshine, you also say hey.
Yeah.
If you say hey and you say y'all, you're a good one in my book.
Hey, y'all. Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that you have a second-grade education. Yours goes a little beyond that, Doctor.
A little bit.
But I absolutely am enthralled to have someone say, hey, and y'all. People will come up to me and say hello, and I said, hello, where are you from that you don't say hey?
Hey.
And they will say, well, as a matter of fact, I do say hey. I don't know why I didn't say hey just then. Nonetheless, we've got those things out of the way, and they were bugging me.
We've established my Southern credentials. If this accent didn't establish it, the fact that I can understand Honey Boo Boo without having the little closed captions should tell you that. That's a show I haven't watched yet. I've seen clips. I've seen parodies. You've seen enough.
South Park still has my attention, but Honey Boo Boo, I'd have to say, would be a close second.
You can watch, if you've watched the commercials, you've seen the show.
Yeah.
I watched it a couple times and was like, wow, this is stealing my brain cells. Okay,
the subject today is deer and elk, and you are the deer and elk coordinator with the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife. Tina Brunges, and in January, when does the deer season end?
Martin Luther King Day is our traditional ending for the archery season for both deer and for elk.
Do you have a good count yet on the total harvest? And if not, by when? April, May? How long does it take?
Well, one of the great things about our telecheck system is we'll have a total count the day after the season ends. And we will have all those data available to us that fast to start breaking it down. And we've actually been breaking it down as the season progresses. And so we're able to sort of keep an eye on how the harvest is progressing as it's progressing, and then with a fairly quick turnaround, assess how did the season go. Well, we knew at the end of gun season that we had a blockbuster on our hands, that this was going to be a record season for the second year in a row, and that it was going to blow last year's record out of the water. And we're at over 143,000 deer now.
Now, when was it? Because it was within the last season or two, and because they span 2 years, I get lost in that. Was it like the 11-12 or the 12-13 season or the 13-14 season, which is we're concluding now? Which one was it that had the headlines a year or two ago?
Well, last year, which would have been the 2012-13 season, we went over 131,000, which completely annihilated the previous record from 2004, which was 124,000. And so we didn't really expect this year to be... We didn't expect it to be as high as last year. And not only was it as high, but it over 10,000 higher. And so, of course, the question becomes why?
Let me ask then why.
Why? Good question. As always, and you've probably done enough biologist interviews to know that we never have one short, sweet answer, the big driver behind it was we had a mast failure in most areas of the state, or a very poor mast crop. And anytime when I say mast, we're usually referring to acorns and beech nuts and some other hard nuts, but generally acorns. And when the trees don't drop a normal amount, then the deer are driven out of the woods and into the open areas. And most hunters like to sit somewhere where they can see. I'm the same way. I like to sit where I can see a few hundred yards in every direction. Well, when the deer are out in those open areas, they're going to encounter more hunters. You're going to see a higher harvest rate.
I remember how much you were thrilled by the weather that we had a couple years ago. The weekends during the gun season were perfect.
Mm-hmm.
How did they do this year?
Not perfect. And that was one of the things that sort of surprised us, was that we didn't have great weather this gun season. We had good weather. Opening weekend, it was kind of windy. It wasn't fantastic. We had some rainy weekends. We had some windy weekends. We didn't have any epic ice storms or anything like that, but we didn't have the fantastic weather that we felt like drove last year's record harvest. So this year we knew that weather wasn't the primary driving factor, and we'd been getting reports of having, oak trees that weren't dropping acorns. I know the area where I hunted, there were no acorns. They just weren't there. And some folks were lucky enough to be in a part of a county where they had a good mast crop, but a lot of folks didn't. And so when the corn got harvested and those fields opened up and there was waste corn on the ground, those were good places to be. Folks who'd put the time in for a food plot had decent rain this year, so the deer were driven to those open areas and people were able to harvest them. And we had good harvest across all of our seasons. We had a record for September. We had an all-time record for our gun harvest. We had an above-average year for our late muzzleloader season. We had an above-average year for some of our youth days. So we saw this consistent, decent weather, not spectacular, but decent enough folks could go. But then we had deer driven out of the woods to go find something to eat. Now the question I get is, well, do we have more deer or do we have more hunters?
Hold that thought and we'll pick up there. Dr. Tina Brunges is my guest. She heads Kentucky's Deer and Elk program, and we are talking about a record-setting harvest year. My name is Charlie Baglin, and this is Kentucky Afield Radio. Charlie Baglin back on Kentucky Afield Radio with Tina Brunges, who finds my company about as stimulating as cold toast, especially when TV show producer Nathan Sangster is in the same hallway. You don't know Nathan, maybe. You see his name on the credits of the show. Yeah, I can live with being second to Tim Farmer, but Nathan? You know the type. Bright, bubbly, Mr. Personality, whimsical, positive attitude, always a smile on his face. Basically everything I'm not, at least according to this week's guest. It's good for a man to know his place, and mine is generally right behind Nathan. Nonetheless, it is deer season, and Kentucky has just wrapped up another banner year. And Tina Brunges, it is your job with the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife to know why.
It is. It's our job to look at which factors are driving this, and do we need to change anything? And I would say that right now we don't. We did see an increase in permit sales for deer. And when I say permit sales for deer, that includes our senior disabled licenses and our sportsman's licenses that include a deer tag. We did see an increase this year, which is fantastic news. We saw back in December we were up almost 10,000. And the vast majority of those were resident hunters and youth hunters. One of the places we saw growth was youth hunters, which is fantastic news. That means these recruitment programs are working. Mm-hmm. And so we're seeing more hunters going afield. We're seeing more hunters be successful. But I think we also have, in a lot of parts of the state, more deer. We continue to have excellent habitat. These deer are going to continue to reproduce at a high rate, what we call their biological potential. And so we're going to see deer being born each year, surviving to the deer season, and then we'll see these good harvests when these hunters go afield.
Let me go back to something you just said, these recruitment programs. If you're in a club or you're in a church or you're in a situation where you're not replacing the members with younger members, that organization, that pastime is just going to wither away. What are the recruitment programs that you're talking about?
Our department has several programs. We have Explore Bow Hunting. We have a lot of programs where our staff and folks that we work with are directly trying to recruit youth. The National Archery in the Schools program is a fantastic program, and it's all across the country, but it's extremely popular here in Kentucky. And then we also have outside groups. We have lots of what we call NGOs, non-government organizations, things like Quality Deer Management Association, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, Quail Unlimited, Ducks Unlimited, the National Wild Turkey Federation, and, of course, a lot of fishing groups that, as a biologist on the deer and elk side, I'm not as familiar with. But all of these groups are very hands-on. You may have 20 members of a club, and they host a dove hunt, and they host a youth deer hunt. And so those programs, I think all of those organizations are keenly aware, just as the department is, like you said, we have to keep bringing youth in because some of us are getting older, mm-hmm. and we've got to replace ourselves, and we want to pass this wonderful heritage we have to the youth. And I think that we've hit some critical mass, that these programs are really starting to take off and be effective, because we know our archery harvest has been increasing each year. The only way that can happen is if more folks are going out archery hunting, because most of our archery hunters are pretty dedicated, and they're successful to the degree they can be successful. So it's not that the ones there are killing more deer as much as more folks are getting into it. They're getting their kids into it. They're getting their neighbors' kids into it. They're getting the guy that they met at church into it. They're getting, their new girlfriend into it. And so when we see these archery harvest numbers increasing each year, that's a pretty good indicator that more people are getting into archery hunting. And archery hunting is not something that you can see the movie The Hunger Games and go, well, that looks pretty good. Go buy a bow and be hunting the next week. You need a mentor. You need someone to help you with that process. And so these programs like Explore Bow Hunting and NASP, not only do they teach the nuts and bolts mechanics, but they also put you in touch with somebody who can help you take that next step.
Which do you use, gun or crossbow or archery? What kind of hunter are you, Tina?
I would have to say that I've used all of those weapons to take deer, and there are things I like about each. I've recently had to give up bow hunting and pick up a crossbow because I have 3 degenerated discs in my back. And when I realized that I just wasn't enjoying it, I said, you know what? As much as I hate to invest in yet another weapon that I don't have room to store, it's time. And so I've not yet, this year was my first year crossbow hunting, but I'm pretty excited about it.
The director of the Division of Wildlife, Karen Waldrop, made a comment. I wanted to get you to comment on that. It says, we've got more hunting opportunities now than we've ever had, and we're nationally recognized as a deer destination. How long can that stay true? How quickly can that fluctuate? If numbers drop or they go up a little bit, can that raise your ranking by 1 or 2 or 3 spots? How does that work?
From year to year, you'll see things change. But there are states that have been destination states for as long as I've been in this business, for 20 years now.
Well, list them. What are they? Wisconsin?
Wisconsin. Everybody immediately thinks of Wisconsin. Iowa, Illinois, Kansas. These are all states that have a reputation for producing high-quality bucks and high-quality hunting experiences. And Kentucky was a sleeper for a long time, and now it's caught up with us. And so the question becomes, how long can you stay there? Well, I would argue you can stay there a very long time. Wisconsin and Kansas and Iowa and Illinois have stayed there a very long time.
My involvement with the Department of Fish and Wildlife following the deer program began in 1991, not long after the 1 buck limit, unlimited doe harvest. These things came into play, and it has made a difference. I've also seen increases in the way that hunter education is taught and offered. Explore Bow Hunting. I've seen NASP come along, becoming an Outdoors Woman program, opportunity after opportunity. So they've all come together to make Kentucky now a destination state. Congratulations, because you've been doing this job now for how many years?
I've been in this position for 8 years, and I had the great fortune to come in behind some folks and join some folks who are absolutely top-notch, who know what they're doing, and who deserve the credit for us being where we are now.
It also says in this press release, and this has me curious, it won't be known until later if Kentucky hunters have topped that trophy mark. What trophy mark is that? But they have enjoyed another record deer harvest. What are those numbers, and what was that record that was set this year that you know of? I
believe it was the 2011-12 season when we had so many Boone and Crockett entries. Like as she said, we won't know until later because of the 60-day drying period and the lag time for folks to get things measured, whether or not we'll top that year. And I don't remember what the exact number was. And folks say, well, what's the big deal about antlers? You know, I'm not an antler worshiper. I'm a meat hunter. But something to keep in mind is that antler quality is a proxy for how good a job are we doing at keeping these deer herd numbers in balance with the habitat, because they're not going to grow those big antlers if we're not doing a good job as hunters and managers of keeping those numbers in tune with what the land can support.
I'm still sitting here perplexed that I am not Mr. Sunshine and that Nathan Sangster of the TV show is. And so I was a little blindsided by that. And earlier on in the show, I was just so out in space thinking, God, I'm not Mr. Sunshine. I asked sort of a silly question. I said, will you know in April or May? And I knew that there was a number you were going to know in April or May. But I knew that Telecheck would give you the numbers actually practically instantly. Pope and Young numbers, the Boone and Crockett numbers. When would you expect to have those? Could it be later in the spring? When do you think those actual numbers will be back for trophy deer?
That's a good question because, we go to press with our guide early in the spring. And so I would urge hunters who want to be recognized in next year's guide to get that information, send it here to our headquarters. and we will include you in there. But as far as being able to really assess, it's usually not until late in the summer.
Bubbling, effervescent. You would think that Tim Farmer would be those things, but behind the scenes, there's just some great people like Nathan Sangster. I'm going to have to watch what he does and try to mimic him a little bit more so that when you're in to talk about the elk draw, say in April, you might just... Well, hello, Mr. Sunshine. I'm dwelling on this because I obviously have some room for improvement in my life.
That would be you and me both. I don't think anyone's ever called me Sunshine.
The harvest this year was 10,000 better than last year. Can increases like that be sustained? Weather, mast, availability, places to hunt, who knows? I may have a football game I've got to attend that Saturday, and I can't get out of it because me and my kids playing.
Right.
So I'm wondering, that 10,000 above, there's a magic number out there that you need to remove from the herd every year just to keep it balanced.
Right.
Are we doing that?
In most areas, yes. In most areas, particularly Zone 2 and Zone 3 counties, where that balance of being able to sustain a harvest year to year is kind of a moving target. And so to kind of circle back to the can we sustain at 10,000 above what we've been, I would not expect to see the same numbers next year because I would hope that we would have a good mast crop. You want to see the number fluctuate a little bit. If it keeps going up, that tells you have an awful lot of deer on the ground.
All right, T, we need to take a break. Fishing report is coming up, and then when we come back, we'll talk about this year's elk draw. Time to get your name in the hat. My name is Charlie Baglin, and this is Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Kentucky Afield Radio. My name is Charlie Baglin, and if you are curious about some of the behind-the-scenes stuff connected to this radio show, upcoming guests, topic suggestions, be sure to like us on Facebook. Just put Kentucky Afield Radio in the search box, spell it out, and you'll find us. Hit like, and then you'll know. Time now for our fishing report.
This is Jeff Crosby with the Central District Fishing Report. Fishing is very slow across the district with many lakes and streams covered in ice. However, there's two species of interest this time of year, which are sauger and trout. Sauger are staging below many of our locks and dams on the Ohio and Kentucky rivers. Please observe all boating regulations when fishing below the locks and dams due to possible dangerous water conditions. Additionally, you can try your luck catching a few trout at many of our Fins lakes or delayed harvest streams such as Big Bone Creek, dry flies, as well as white med spinners, small white jigs are excellent baits to catch a few of these trout. This time of year is a great time to work on that fishing equipment. Oiling and greasing reels and also organizing tackle boxes is a great thing to do this time of year. Good luck and good fishing.
At Kentucky and Berkeley Lakes, fishing has slowed down quite a bit. The winter weather we've had has left many boat ramps closed because of frozen water. Just can't get in right now and fish, so it's a good time to maybe clean out those tackle boxes and get ready for spring fishing. But on the chance that you are able to get in, they are catching a few crappie out in deeper water, spider rigging, slow trolling the creek channels. The crappie are suspended. A good time to use a jig tipped with a minnow and just fish real slow. Bass fishing, again, if you can get out on the lake, find you a calm point, try throwing an Alabama rig. Below the dams, they have been spilling water at the dams, and so the tailwaters are kind of high but falling. And so hopefully that'll pick up, and when the water does fall there, sauger fishing will start picking up. Well, this is Paul Reister, and hope you find a good day to go fishing.
Hi, this is Eric Cummins with your Southwest Kentucky Fishing Report. Barren River Lake is at winter pool. Bass fishing has been slow, but some fish are being caught on grubs, lipless crankbaits, and medium cranks on the main lake channels and long points in 10 to 20 foot of water. Barren River Lake has some nice smallmouth, so be sure to pack your float and fly gear to fish these same spots for some bruiser smallmouth. Crappie are being taken in 5 to 15 foot of water with minnows, tube jigs, and a combo of both of those. Even though our winter has been exceptionally cold, avoid that temptation to try ice fishing on your local pond or lake, as minimum ice thickness for one person is 4 inches, which is rarely achieved in Kentucky due to our rapid changes in weather. As always, good luck and good fishing. Be sure to wear that life jacket.
Baglin back, and a trivia question. are any of the original elk that were brought into Kentucky during the original elk restoration effort still alive today? We have the answer coming up this half hour as Kentucky Afield Radio continues after the break.
Kentucky's Nature and Wildlife Fund. You see it as a contribution option when you prepare your state tax return. But you also see it as songbirds and wildflowers. You can see it in clear flowing streams. Sometimes it's so secluded you may never see it at all. But if you only see it on your PC as you prepare your taxes, that's good too. Google it and see the difference this fund makes. Kentucky's Nature and Wildlife Fund, the natural tax shelter.
Charlie Bagman back on Kentucky Afield Radio. Dr. Tina Brunges is my guest this week. Tina is in charge of the Deer and Elk Program for the state of Kentucky. She is a PhD, but she's one of us. There's no dog and pony show with her. She will tell you exactly how it is, even if it hurts your feelings. Like hardly acknowledging my presence when she came in to do the show, yet almost tripped over herself to say, "Hey, sunshine," to Kentucky Afield television show producer Nathan Sangster, standing in the hallway right outside my studio. So it's honesty like that that gives you and me a no fairy tale, exactly what's going on account with our deer herd in the state. So I'll accept that. What is wrong with the greenery in this scenery? Are there ever too many deer?
There are a lot of factors that play into that, because you're right. Virtually every state has regions within that state where deer numbers are so high that they're unfortunately considered a nuisance. What plays into us being so fortunate, one of the factors is that my predecessors had the wisdom to see that we needed to start harvesting does sooner rather than later. And one of the things that seems somewhat counterintuitive is that it is actually, in a lot of cases, more difficult to rein in an overpopulated deer herd than it is to grow one that's struggling. If you've got a struggling deer herd, in a lot of cases you can back off on your harvest and that herd will respond. Not always. There are other factors that play in, but in general. The flip side of that is, and a lot of northeastern and southern states have found this out the hard way, once deer numbers exceed some threshold, it is very difficult to bring that back into balance with recreational sport hunting alone.
Then what else would you use?
Sharpshooters, and sometimes you just live with overabundant deer herds. A lot of places are living with overabundant deer herds, and that's where the art and the human dimension side of deer management comes in, because people look outside, they see these beautiful deer, and they see a green landscape, and they wonder what's the problem. Why is Fish and Wildlife telling us we need to kill our deer? That doesn't make sense to us.
But what's missing on the landscape, other animal-wise?
Diversity.
Songbirds, rabbits, quail?
Well, and that's where you really run into problems is, you tell somebody, look, these deer are decimating the plant community here. And they look at you and they say, I see all kinds of greenery. I see cardinals. I see blue jays. I see lots of birds. Yes, that is true. But what you're seeing is a landscape that is not as diverse as it could be. And the species that you're seeing, raccoons, possums, cardinals, blue jays, sparrows, all of those are generalist species, meaning they can survive almost anywhere. Deer are a generalist. Rabbits can be a generalist. They do well in neighborhoods. And so, but what you're not seeing are the more uncommon species, and you're not seeing the small mammals that are sort of the base of community health for a whole lot of other species. Different species of Peromyscus, which is a mouse. And you may have one species in a neighborhood, but
Peromyscus. I've learned a new word today.
Peromyscus. But if you go out into the woods and the fields and a more healthy habitat, there may be 4 species of Peromyscus, depending on habitat variations. And if you go out into a mature woodlot, you're going to see different species of sparrows and warblers. You go into town, you're not going to see warblers. You might see one Cooper's hawk, but you're not going to see sharpshins and Coopers and red tails and red shoulders there all year round.
So it's the diversity we need, and it's the diversity we don't have if we have an overabundance.
Right. And the other thing is, a deer can look perfectly healthy standing there, But what you don't recognize is that animal can be incredibly stressed. They may be carrying a very heavy parasite load. They may have an esophagus that's completely raw because they're eating red cedar, because there's nothing else to eat. And you look out, when you drive around and you see bush honeysuckle, fescue grass, and you see locust trees, that's not a very diverse world. That doesn't support a whole lot of even the common stuff. You see a few of them, but you don't see a whole lot of them. And maybe people don't care. And that's what's hard for us as biologists to keep in mind. We work for the people, and what the people want is what we have to always keep at the forefront. And if people don't want a diverse world, then it's our job to try to educate them why that's important and hope that we can convince them that that's important. But if we can't, we still have to work for them and what they want. And that's hard for us. You know, if the citizens of Kentucky said to me, we don't want any more deer. We want deer gone. We want deer to be like wolves. We want them gone. We as an agency would have to respond to that. We'd have to try to educate them about the value, but ultimately we work for them.
But on the other end of the spectrum, too many deer aren't a good thing either.
They're not, and it's hard for... It's one of those sort of unseen things, you know. If you've not hit a deer with your car, you might not be as cognizant of what a burden that is. If you've not had Lyme disease, you may not realize that having too many deer throws the system out of whack. You get tick problems, your dog goes out in the yard, brings ticks in the house, you get Lyme disease, which is no joke. And that's where having that more diverse system with different species and fewer deer, it plays into ecosystem health on a level that we don't always see from inside our houses and our busy lives.
So a record deer harvest like we had is a very good thing, and it goes far beyond just the trophy you're going to put on your wall over the fireplace and the food on the table.
Yes.
It helps everything.
It does, and that's something that we maybe don't emphasize enough, is that you're helping the farmers when you're getting those deer out of there. You're helping the folks who drive the roads when you get those deer out of there. You're putting free-range, organic, hormone-free meat on the table for your family. There are so many positives, and I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in, you know, one brush fire after another that we forget all the great things that harvesting deer does for both people and for the environment.
Tim Farmer will sometimes bring in venison chili. I look forward to those days. I mean, that's some excellent eating. Let's move on to elk.
The application period for the 2014, I can't believe it's already 2014, the application period has opened. It opened January 1. Go on our website, fw.ky.gov. Go to the license page as if you were purchasing a license, and in there is the option to enter for next season's elk lottery. And you can enter one time or two times, depending on your preferences. And if you've got kids that are under 16, they can actually enter for a separate youth hunt. So they have 3 opportunities to enter. We'll have 1,000 tags again next year. And we certainly urge people to go on our website, apply for it. It's $10 for an application, and all of that money comes back to Fish and Wildlife, and the majority of it funds elk management.
The adults can sign up for their choice of 2 hunts, cow or bull, firearm or archery. You can take your pick. The pick 2 situation still in effect. But for youth, do they get that option too?
Yes. So let's say you have your 15-year-old daughter is really emulating Jennifer Lawrence in Catching Fire, and she's really gotten into this archery situation. And she wants to apply for the archery cow tag and the archery bull tag. Well, because she's 15 or younger, she can also apply for, there are 10 special youth permits. And those youth permits are actually good for all of the seasons. So let's say she got drawn for that one, and we do that drawing first because that's the best tag. She would actually have the option of archery hunting during that early September archery bull season, firearms hunting, all the way through. They get to hunt whichever one until they harvest an elk.
So whatever they want to do, they can do.
Yes, so They have lots of options, and we strongly encourage kids to put in for that one because that's kind of the premier tag.
That is kind of cool. Now, can they enter once or twice?
They can enter once for that youth tag, so just one time. So they pay their $10, and it's only shows up as an option if the child is under 16. So if I go in to apply for the elk lottery, which I do not because I'm the elk coordinator, but if I did, because I'm old, it would just show me the 4 adult options. But if my niece were putting in, she's 12 years old, then when we put in her birthday and everything pops up, then we would have the option of also entering her into that special youth hunt.
If you're a youth, you can't go onto the adult page and do the pick 2.
You can. Yes, you can. So when you're a youth, let's say that you're applying for your 15-year-old daughter. When you enter all the information, one of the things you'll enter is birth date. And so you get to a page that has a list of all your options. Sportsman's license, a youth license, a fishing license. All of those things show up on the page, and you choose the ones you want. For that youth, they have the option of applying for that youth hunt, because that will show up as an option, and it'll say, I think it says elk youth only hunt. They can apply for that, but then they can also choose 2 of the pick 2 options as well. So we end up with quite a few kids getting drawn for what we call the regular hunt, which is anyone can apply for.
When is the deadline for registration? April
30th is the deadline, midnight Eastern time. So you folks in the western part of the state, keep in mind that it's midnight Eastern time that the application period closes, and then we try during the first week of May. All of the data actually go to an outside vendor to do the draw. The department does not do the draw. We have an outside independent firm that does the draw. Then they send the results back to us. We post those up so that folks can go on the website, enter their Social Security number or the license number from where they bought it, or they can call our 1-800 number and find out whether or not they got drawn.
When does this draw take place?
Generally the first week of May. And I fudge that just because we've occasionally run into issues with the system crashing, because everybody waits till the last minute. Please don't wait till the last minute. And so it'll crash the server, and we may have to add a day, and then that puts you behind a little bit. And then, even though our outside vendor knows this is coming, if something happens and they're not able to be Johnny on the spot, getting that draw conducted and getting those results back to us. And so, but we usually know by the first week of May when we're going to be able to get those results up.
The website, if you would like to get your name in the hat, is FW, as in Fish Wildlife, fw.ky.gov. And you will see it on the home page there of the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife's website. It is time for a break. We'll have one more segment with Dr. Tina Brunches. When we come back, I'm Charlie Baglin, and this is Kentucky Afield Radio. You are listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. My name is Charlie Baglin, and we're in our closing few minutes of the show. Dr. Tina Brunges, who is in charge of Kentucky's Deer and Elk program, is in the studio with me. And Tina, there's always something new to learn. There's a study going on now. Tell me about it.
We started a research project looking at survival and mortality of adult bulls 3 years ago now. And the student has wrapped up his field collection. He's actually in the office working on writing his dissertation. But we've gotten some interesting preliminary results from that.
A 4-year program, right? Or you're 3 years into this 4-year study? How's that work?
We had 3 years of data collection that will go into his dissertation, and where we were really going...
PhD student, obviously.
A PhD student at the University of Kentucky, correct. He was trying to get, I think, 80 collars a year out or something like that, and maintain a really high sample size.
80 collars a year. Explain what that means for folks who don't know.
We go out and we actually dart as many bulls as we can, all mature bulls, 2.5 and older, and we put a radio collar on them, ear tags. Those animals are wearing that collar, hopefully, depending on whether it's a GPS collar or a regular radio collar, from 1 to 4 years. That allows us to monitor, sometimes by air, sometimes by truck, and we listen for that radio collar, and it gives out a steady beep. As long as that animal's alive and moving, we can tell where he is, and most importantly, is he still alive. When that animal dies, there's actually a little switch in the collar that if he remains motionless for a long period of time, 8 hours or more, it will start beeping twice as fast. And we call that a mortality signal.
They do sleep. They'll lay down and take a nap.
They do. We've actually had bulls we thought were dead, and you walk in on them, and they're very much alive. They'll hole up somewhere, lay down, and not move enough during an 8-hour period that collar will switch over.
So is this satellite-oriented? Is it triangulated? How do you know if the animal moves?
Well, the radio collars actually have a mercury switch in them. And if you've ever seen a drop of mercury, you know it's very sensitive. So what that collar has in there is a little mercury switch. And so every time that animal moves, that thing's bobbling back and forth. And so it keeps the beep rate steady. Beep, 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 beep.
Now, if they can't hear it,
they can't hear it.
You can hear it on your end.
We can hear it with the receiver either from the ground or we can put it in an airplane, which in eastern Kentucky we have to do pretty regularly. And so, but once he stops and that mercury switch isn't moving, then it starts beep, 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 beep. And so you know, okay, this animal hasn't moved. We need to go in and see what's going on with him. And most of the time you go in and the animal has either died or the collar has been removed or has fallen off. And fortunately that doesn't happen very often, but what we're hoping is to get in there quickly enough after the animal dies to determine what did he die from. And for our adult bulls, the vast majority that die, a happy hunter is at the other end of that.
There was a quote here from the newspaper a few weeks ago, and it says this: "We want to sustain the herd to where we can have a huntable population, allow the maximum opportunity for hunters, and still have a healthy herd that behaves and acts like an elk herd should." And this was said by Gabe Jenkins. What does that mean, acts and behaves like an elk herd should?
Elk, like a lot of other animals, deer being a notable example of this, quickly become habituated. It's kind of like if you live next to the railroad tracks and trains come by daily. After a while, you actually don't hear those trains come by. And you'll have company over and a train will go by and they think your house is falling down. And they're like, how do you not notice that? You've become habituated. Well, deer and elk do the same thing. They're up here on these wide open strip jobs, and they see coal trucks and they see heavy equipment, or they're close to an ATV park and they see ATVs all day long. They quickly learn, I don't have to run away from that. They're not going to burn energy running away from everything. They're going to get used to it. When we were only issuing 12 tags, 40 tags, 100 tags, yet we had thousands of elk out there, a lot of those elk weren't seeing hunters. They weren't getting shot at. They weren't getting hunted. And they were becoming a little obnoxious.
Were they being pursued by any other wildlife out there? We don't have wolves. We don't have mountain lions.
Nope.
Did they think they were king of the jungle?
They are king of the jungle. At 500 pounds for an adult cow and 800 or 900 for an adult bull, gross tonnage rules apply.
Well, nothing's going to mess with it anyways. There's nothing to mess with it.
There's not. There's, even an elk calf at, a couple of days of age, there's not much that can mess with them. And the first few days, Mama's right there to make sure that any nervy coyotes or feral dogs learn the error of their ways pretty quickly.
So bullets coming out of nowhere.
Well,
keep them in check psychologically?
Absolutely. Anybody who lives in a subdivision where there's no hunting has seen this habituation firsthand with deer. They see that these deer, you have to practically hit them with the car to get them out of your driveway. That doesn't happen on hunted farms. You get deer that learn respect very quickly, and they behave more naturally. It's not natural for a prey animal like a deer or an elk to be so zen about humans moving around them. They should have some fear of us. And we want them to be visible, and we want people to see them and enjoy them, but at the same time, when they become fearless, they become a problem. They get in your garden. They will chew on your vehicle to get the salt off. Sometimes they're just obnoxious. They'll tear up fences. They will destroy cemeteries and golf courses. And so hunting allows us to keep those animals a little more respectful of humans, which is good for them. They're not getting hit by cars. They're not congregating in yards. And obviously it's good for the people. And
it's good for the elk herd. Gabe, are you happy with what you're finding?
It's kind of fascinating to us to see how long can they go. We still have original release cows getting harvested. These are cows that were brought in from places like Utah in 2001, and she gets harvested by a hunter. That's fascinating to us. That is fascinating. I would have thought that those original elk would have been long gone by now, and we would be seeing the grandchildren, the grand elk. Yep. From those original, but I'm wrong. I'm glad I asked you that question, because I had no idea that they would live that long. We didn't either.
I'm glad you were in charge. I'm glad you were on the show today, despite the fact you spent an hour rubbing in my face the fact that I don't measure up to Kentucky Afield TV show producer Nathan Sangster.
You don't radiate the way he does. He radiates.
I don't know that anybody does. He's just a nice, honest Christian fella, good husband, father, kid in Boy Scouts, the whole bit. I mean, the type of guy that just makes you sick. Never said a foul word in his life. You'll hear him sometime get mad. He'll say, sugar. And you'll know that something is terribly wrong when he says sugar. That's a good place to stop. Tina, thank you a million for coming out. I guess I should have. Do you still not text and drive?
Of course not.
Wonderful. This is Charlie Bagman. We are out of time. Join us again in a week, and we will go inside outdoors again. Right here on Kentucky Afield Radio.